right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me on part two. This is the avoidant version, okay? This is the avoidant edition, rather, of the intimacy turnaround. If you have not watched Intimacy Turnaround Part 1, go back and watch the Intimacy Turnaround Challenge for men only, and then that's going to give you the foundation of everything you see on this board. It's about 45 minutes, and then you can come back here, because if you find yourself here, the reason you're here is because you have a wife who has an avoidant attachment style, an avoidant wife. Now, I want to get right into this so I can cover this as in depth as I possibly can for video, and I hope to give you some keys to moving forward in your relationship with your wife. Before you try to get closer to your wife, you need to understand why she moves away. It can be very, very disconcerting when you're doing everything you can to know her, to understand her, to validate, to empathize, to cherish, to be physically vulnerable, and she consistently moves away from that. You need to understand why she moves away. Before we talk about what to do, in other words, before we talk about what to do, we need you to understand something about her. Because if you don't understand this, you're going to personalize almost everything that she does. Her silence will feel like rejection. Her distance will feel like abandonment to you. Her independence will feel like she doesn't need you. Her lack of emotional expression will feel like she doesn't care. Her desire for space will feel like she doesn't want you. Her difficulty initiating affection feels like a lack of desire. And eventually you're going to develop this story that my wife doesn't love me. And you can end up villainizing your wife. And the fact of the matter is, these things have everything to do with her and probably not very much at all to do with you. They're a report card on her nervous system and her attachment style, which predates you, but it continues to show up in the relationship. You just want to make sure that you are earning secure attachment and walking in your sonship in God so that you are secure enough to navigate the intimacy turnaround with your avoidant spouse. Now, what you're experiencing as rejection, it may not be a conscious attempt to reject you at all. She's not waking up thinking, how can I keep my husband away from me today? No, she's probably not sitting there calculating how much affection she can withhold. She may simply be doing what she learned to do a very long time ago. It's from her internal operating system. She learned to take care of herself. And the crazy thing is, she may not even see that as a problem. She may not see it. She may actually see it as one of her greatest strengths. Oftentimes, your wife may describe herself as independent and strong and low maintenance and private and self-reliant and responsible and not needy and able to handle things herself. She may be proud of those things. Why wouldn't she be? They worked, okay? These are adaptations that she took on in childhood for survival, to adapt to the environment that she was raised in. She may even see them as her personality. They're adaptations. She learned very early in life, if something needs done, I'll do it. If I'm hurting, I'll deal with it. If I'm overwhelmed, I'm going to figure it out. If someone disappoints me, I'll adjust. If nobody shows up, I've got it. If relationships become chaotic, I'll retreat. If emotions are overwhelming, I'll get practical. If someone gets too close, I'll create some room. And those adaptations have served her extraordinarily well. She may, in fact, take pride in her independence. So though they've come to help her be responsible and competent and dependable and organized and productive and resilient. And people outside your marriage actually love these qualities about her, okay? Her employer loves these qualities. Her friends admire them. Her church celebrates them. Her family probably depends on them. She gets things done. She doesn't create drama. She doesn't constantly ask people for help. She doesn't need everybody's attention. She's capable. She's all of these things. And then she gets married. And suddenly, the very strategies that helped her succeed everywhere else begin creating problems inside of a intimate relationship, because marriage asks something of us that work doesn't ask. Marriage asks us to know one another. Marriage asks to know us. Let me inside. Let me know you, understand you, validate, empathize, cherish, be physically vulnerable, and have and experience sexual intimacy with you. So you may be the one person in her life that telling her that something's wrong. Now, she's probably been looked at as wise beyond her years, and she's probably been looked at as, some people have referred to her as cold or indifferent or unemotional or a lot of other things. And she hasn't liked that, but she's able to get through it because honestly, she's pretty successful being that way. But inside the relationship, you are there, unfortunately, and maybe as a constant reminder that these things are interrupting the very intimacy that you all are desiring. Think of how confusing this can be. And I'm talking about from her perspective. For most of her life, people have said, you're strong, you're independent, you have always had your head on straight, you're so mature, you never need anything, you figure it out, you're organized, administrative. But then she marries you. And now you're saying you don't let me in, you're distant, you don't talk to me, you never initiate, you're emotionally unavailable, you don't need me, you don't tell me what you're feeling, you shut down, you avoid difficult conversations, you don't handle communication well, you avoid conflict, you don't want enough affection, you don't want enough sex. And from her perspective, she may genuinely think, why can't you just accept me for who I am? Everybody else seems to be fine with me. Why aren't you? And that's why attachment conversations can actually become so incredibly threatening, because you think you're identifying a relational pattern, but she is looking at this as her personality, not as self-protection adaptations that are showing up in her marriage. There's something wrong with your personality. That's what she's hearing. There's something wrong with my personality. So you think you're asking for connection, but she hears criticism. You think you're saying, I miss you, and she's like, you're saying I'm failing again. You think you're saying, can we talk? And she's like, well, here comes another conversation about everything I'm doing wrong. So she withdraws, which confirms your fear. And so you pursue harder, which confirms her fear. She's going to be engulfed and you're going to be abandoned. Well, why does this seem to only happen inside relationships? It's one of the most important things that I want you to understand about attachment. Attachment adaptations become most visible when attachment's activated. Okay? Those adaptations can be used to run the world, but they become more visible when you get inside of a relationship. Your wife may function beautifully at work. She may have friendships and serves at the church, and she may talk to people all day, may be funny and warm and confident and competent, and you think, how can you give everybody else this version of you, but I get the shutdown? Because those relationships may not require the same degree of vulnerability. Her coworker on the job, right? Think about that. Is not asking for access to her deepest emotional world. That's not happening. Okay. Her friend isn't sharing a bed with her. The woman in the church office isn't saying, why don't you initiate affection with me? So her employer is not asking her to reveal what happens inside of her when she's afraid of disappointing someone. See, marriage gets closer. Marriage, by default, the relationship is an evaluation. You're under evaluation. What is on? What is off? What can be improved? We're trying to create intimacy. And so closeness is precisely where attachment adaptations become visible. And so you don't automatically conclude she treats me better than everyone else. That wouldn't be proper. It's just that she simply or you may simply be the person standing closest to the places that she has protected the longest in her life. Now, I want you to ask a question. What has closeness historically meant to her? And I'm talking about all the way down as a little girl, because closeness isn't automatically experienced as safe. Imagine a little girl whose caregiver is unpredictable. So sometimes they're warm, sometimes they're angry, sometimes they're present, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're attentive, sometimes they're just unavailable. So closeness becomes unpredictable. So closeness is stressful for her. Or imagine a little girl whose feelings are regularly dismissed. Stop crying, or you're fine, or that's nothing to be upset about. Or she sees her sisters or brothers treated awful when they have big emotions, and she learns shut down emotions. Emotions are not good things. So now emotional expression doesn't produce connection. Emotional expression, it produces embarrassment or dismissal. Okay, maybe asking for something. Uh, uh, she may be asking for something as a little girl, and she's seen as so needy. So her dependence brought disappointment. So she learned, in order not to be a disappointment, I will take care of myself. Maybe conflict in the home meant screaming and criticism and contempt and withdrawal or passive aggression or sarcasm or days of silence. So she learned, I avoid conflict, okay, because conflict doesn't lead to intimacy or closeness. Conflict leads to chaos. Maybe vulnerability was later used against her. Someone took advantage of her, and so now she was completely vulnerable, and it was used against her. Maybe her parents were emotionally intrusive and wanted access to everything she thought about and everything she felt. Maybe affection came with strings attached. Maybe no one ever repaired after there was conflict. Maybe there was some dramatic trauma in the middle of it all, okay? Maybe emotional intimacy just wasn't modeled at all. There was just no emotional attunement. No, everyone functioned, everyone behaved. They had a house over their head, food on the table, clothes on their body. Everyone did what they were supposed to do, but nobody really knew anybody. So what does this little girl mean? Or what does she learn? I'm sorry. What does she learn that closeness means? What does she learn that depending on people means? What does this little girl learn in her relational grid when she's younger? Maybe closeness is unpredictable and needs create problems, and depending on people creates disappointment, and emotions complicate things, and conflict threatens connection, and vulnerability gives people access to hurt me. Privacy is what keeps me safe. I am safest when I can handle myself. So nobody had to teach her those things. Life taught them to her. And eventually they became adaptations, and they run in her subconscious background. It's just the way she does life. It's not personal against you, but it is personal for her. That's where she feels comfortable. That's where she feels safe. Then we call those adaptations avoidant. And this is why I want husbands to be really careful, because dismissive avoidance isn't simply my wife doesn't care about anybody. No. What you're seeing is protection. She might minimize needs. She might compartmentalize. She becomes practical. She creates distance. She handles things alone. She suppresses vulnerable emotions. She avoids conversations that feel emotionally overwhelming. She may disconnect from what she's feeling before she could ever explain it to you. Okay? She protects autonomy. She guards her internal world, and she doesn't do any of it consciously. She does it all as a way of life. This is just the way I am. And because she's practiced these things for years and years, for her, they actually may not feel like protection at all. They feel like personality. I'm independent. I don't like talking about feelings. I need my space. I don't need all the affection. I don't understand why everything has to be discussed all the time. And so she may genuinely mean every word that she's saying when she says those things, because when you've worn armor long enough, it starts feeling like skin. And so in the first intimacy turnaround video, I gave you 7 floors, okay? Knowing and understanding and validation and empathy and cherishing and physical vulnerability, and then sexual intimacy. Well, you might think, perfect, I'll just start doing, these floors 1 through 6. I'm going to take the challenge and I'm just going to start doing all this. Slow down. Wait a minute. Because if your wife is an avoidant person, every one of those floors potentially asks something vulnerable of an avoidant person. So knowing says, let me into your internal world. Okay, but let's look at that from how she's going to experience that. She says, wait a second, that's not intimacy, that's intrusion on my privacy. Okay, she learned to be private. Understanding says, let me get closer to your experience. But she might experience that as threatening. Okay? That you it's like I'm not being understood, I'm being examined or questioned. Okay? Validation says, let me acknowledge your emotional reality, but she has learned to minimize that reality herself. So you're pulling, you're asking something of her she's not even giving to herself. Empathy says, let me come sit beside you emotionally. Well, she's like, wait a second. I don't co-regulate. I regulate alone if I regulate at all. I don't need your empathy. Cherishing says, let me pour out affection toward you. But receiving that's R-E-C-E-I. Receiving creates vulnerability. And then when she receives from you, she feels like she owes you. Now there's a debt to be repaid. Or there is a expectation because she got something from you and she runs on fairness. Now she's supposed to give you something back. Okay? Physical vulnerability says, let our bodies experience closeness without armor. But physical closeness may already carry expectation. And then you have the sexual intimacy. Now look at the problem. If floors 1 through 6 are difficult to tolerate, floor 7 has nowhere healthy to rest. So what happens is, if she will not allow you because of her avoidance, even though you are wanting to know her and understand and validate and empathize and cherish and physical vulnerability, you're showing up secure. And when she pulls away and wants privacy, you're not taking it personally. She feels this is threat, and you're not taking it personally. You're not feeling rejected. You're regulating your own emotions. You're just trying to build intimacy within the relationship because you love her, but she has never learned to receive, and she is avoidant. Then what happens is this intimacy doesn't exist because of her inability or her capacity to receive it. Then what happens is the sexual intimacy has to simply go to duty or obligation. She functions there. This is where some marriages can just become incredibly painful, because she may still have the sexual intimacy, but sex can slowly become disconnected from the rest of intimacy. It becomes something married people do, or something my husband needs, or something that keeps him happy, or something that prevents another difficult conversation. She actually uses it to shut down other things. If I do this, then all that will go away. Okay, it's something I should provide. It's something easier to do than to deal with disappointment. And now you have this sexual activity without much intimacy. And that's miserable for her. And to be quite honest, that's miserable for him too. Because as you learn not to put all of your worth and value and all of that on sexual intimacy, and you're actually building a relationship here, and that's not being built, but you're still having the duty or obligation coming toward you in the arena of sexual activity. Now it's still without much intimacy, and it can feel very empty, and it can feel very alone, because most men don't ultimately want access to a woman's body while knowing her heart isn't participating. Most men actually want access to a woman's body while knowing her heart is engaged. They want to be wanted. So now both people are starving. You're thinking, why doesn't my wife desire me? She's thinking, why does closeness always eventually require something from me? Which that's what relationships do. They require commitment. They require connection. They require closeness. They require conflict. They require communication. But all of those things require vulnerability and closeness and intimacy. And it's requiring something from her. And the more you pursue sexual reassurance, the more obligation she's going to experience. The harder genuine desire becomes, the more rejected you're going to feel. And the more rejected you feel, the harder you're going to pursue. And then we have this cycle that continues to go on and on. You pursue harder, she moves away more. You pursue harder, she moves away more. And neither person necessarily understands how you're building this. But it's the tragedy of avoidance. Your wife may actually long for the very thing she's protecting herself from. She wants to be known, but her adaptations don't allow her to give her private world to you. A lot of times until it's way too late. She keeps it all inside. You may be very safe for her to talk to about it. You've worked on yourself and you're a safe, regulated person, but she can't bring it to you because she feels unsafe. It's not that you're unsafe, but she feels unsafe trusting anyone with her internal world. She may want someone to understand her. She may want someone to cherish her. She may want some deep companionship. She may want affection. She may want passionate sexuality. She may want to experience that feeling of someone finally knows all of me and stays. But wanting intimacy and having the capacity to tolerate intimacy are not the same thing. And that's the paradox. She can long for connection and become activated by connection at the same time. And she can want closeness and then feel overwhelmed when you're close. She can miss you when you're gone, but then when you return, she needs space from you. She can want to be understood, but then feel exposed when you ask questions. She can want affection, but then get tense when affection carries any kind of expectation with it. She can want a great marriage, but instinctively she's reaching for the strategies that keep intimacy at a manageable distance. And that's why simply telling her, but you said you wanted closeness, that doesn't solve anything, because her longing and her protection can exist at the same time. So her inner world may be incredibly private. This is another thing I think husbands need to understand. There may be an entire world inside your wife that you rarely ever see. Her thoughts, her fears, her longings, her disappointments, her questions, her dreams, her anger, her grief, her resentments, her sexuality, her insecurity, her needs. She may experience all of this internally, but not reveal it externally. And that internal world feels profoundly personal to her, but you're trying to know her and understand and validate, empathize, cherish, be vulnerable, enter in, but she's not willing to give it. It feels unsafe for her. There's just this note, like, no, I'm not going to give that to anyone. This is so when you come toward her asking, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's wrong? Why are you quiet? Why won't you tell me? You're just thinking, I want to know my wife. And she's experiencing discomfort and pressure and feeling exposed and vulnerable. So when you ask her another question and then another, and then you ask another, now your pursuit of intimacy becomes the very thing her nervous system wants distance from. So she shuts down. And you say, well, there she goes again. And if you're not secure, she's rejecting me. No, what she's doing is using her adaptations. That's how she learned to survive. She doesn't have the capacity, the emotional and relational capacity to enter into that kind of intimacy. So you have to learn to meet her inside of her experience. Because inside her experience, she is not saying, I reject you. She's just saying, this is too much. I need room. It's just too much. So I need some space. So that distinction is really enormous. Okay, but now what I want to talk about is, and really it's about you, because brother, understanding your wife's avoidance will accomplish very little if you're constantly activated by it. If her silence automatically means rejection, then you're going to pursue. If her distance automatically means abandonment, then you're going to panic. If her request for space means she doesn't love me, or she just takes it and doesn't even tell you where she's at internally. She just takes space. She just, all of a sudden she's distant. So there's no consistency. Well, you're going to say she doesn't love me. You're going to protest. If her lack of sexual desire means I'm just not enough, well, then you're going to need reassurance, and you're going to drive and push and go harder and harder to get it from her. And your nervous system is protecting, or while her nervous system is protecting against closeness, yours is demanding closeness to feel safe. And now there's demands. And that is an exhausting marriage. It's why before you try to navigate an avoidant wife, you need somewhere solid to stand. Now, I want you to go, if you haven't watched the first intimacy turnaround video, I want you to go watch it, and especially revisit what I said at the end. I drew this up on the board: God, self, and wife. This is the foundation of entering into that security and secure attachment, because this intimacy with God, yourself, and security in your sonship in Christ, you're going to need it in this portion, because your wife cannot be responsible for proving that you are valuable. Her sexual desire cannot be responsible for proving that you're masculine. Her emotional availability cannot be responsible for proving that you matter. Her affection cannot become the evidence that you're lovable. You need an identity deeper than her response to you. I'm going to say that again. You need an identity that is deeper than her response to you. That means I am known by God, I am loved by God, I am received by God, I am chosen in Christ, I am secure in Him, I am accepted, I am loved, I am wanted. And from that place, you can begin separating her distance from your worth, her silence from your identity, her boundary from your abandonment, her overwhelm from your rejection, her sexuality from proof of your masculinity. That doesn't mean your needs disappear. It doesn't mean you tolerate a marriage with no mutuality. It doesn't mean you become passive. It doesn't mean you stop desiring your wife. And it absolutely doesn't mean avoidance gets excused forever because we've attached a psychological label to it. It means that I can address what is happening without being emotionally destroyed by what is happening. That is secure attachment in Christ. So you have some work to do before you ask her to do her work, because you are the head, you are the initiator. Okay, you need to learn to regulate disappointment. You need to recognize your own attachment activation. You need to stop turning every withdrawal into a catastrophe. You need friendships. You need a brotherhood. You need prayer. You need conversations with the Father. You need emotional awareness for yourself. You need a purpose. You need ability to sit with uncomfortable feelings without immediately demanding that your wife make them disappear. You have to learn, I can want connection and not chase it. I can experience distance without disappearing myself. I can hear no without becoming worthless. I can respect her autonomy without surrendering my own needs. I can love without controlling. I can have boundaries without punishing. I can remain present without pursuing, because we're about to enter one of the most counterintuitive relational dynamics that you are ever going to navigate with an avoidant wife. Because sometimes pursuing intimacy creates less intimacy. I hate to say that. Sometimes asking another question produces less disclosure. Sometimes trying harder makes her nervous system work harder to create distance. Sometimes giving space produces more connection than demanding connection. Sometimes a hug becomes safer when she knows she can refuse it. Sometimes affection becomes more desirable when it stops carrying an invoice with it. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is remain warm and available and secure. Warm and available and secure without chasing her down the hallway emotionally all the time. And that's what we're going to learn. This isn't about manipulating an avoidant woman into opening up. No, it's not. It's not 7 tricks to make your avoidant wife want you. This is not that video. We're learning how to stop reinforcing the cycle. We're going to learn how to create conditions where intimacy has a chance to become safer. And we're learning how to communicate needs without pressure. We're learning how to invite without pursuing. We're learning how to give space without withdrawing love. We're learning how to cherish without demanding reciprocation. We're learning how to honor her autonomy without abandoning mutuality. And we're learning where your responsibility ends and where hers begins, because you cannot heal her attachment pattern for her. You cannot force vulnerability. You cannot manufacture desire. You can't love her enough to make her want you, or love her enough to open her up, or love her enough that if you work hard enough, she's just gonna want intimacy in every area. It's not true. She has work that she has to show up and do too. You can't love someone so perfectly that they never become activated again. That is her work to do. You cannot fix her. She has some things to approach inside of herself, but you can stop making her protection your identity crisis. When she's protecting herself because that predates you, and she's learning to go and retreat or withdraw or pull back, that doesn't mean you're worthless and don't have value and don't have worth and you're rejected. You can stop answering distance with panic. Just because she distanced herself, you don't have to panic. You can stop answering her shutdown with another pursuit. You can stop answering sexual disappointment with pressure all the time. So it's like becoming increasingly secure regardless of how quickly she changes or doesn't change. So now that we understand the woman underneath of this avoidance, and we understand why independence can feel like strength to her, why vulnerability can feel exposing, closeness can create pressure, sexuality can become obligation, and why your own security matters so much, I want to then step into the intimacy turnaround avoidant addition. Remember, we're in the same house, the same 7 floors, but we're going to learn a radically different way of approaching the door. Okay? Some of you men that listen to me describe these 7 floors and thought, you don't know my wife. I've tried asking the questions. She still doesn't want to talk. I've tried affection. She pulls away. I've tried telling her she's beautiful. She shrugs it off. I've tried spending time with her. She'd rather be alone. I've tried asking her what she's feeling. She says nothing, or I don't know. So what am I supposed to do with that? It's legitimate, okay? That's the dismissive avoidant wife, because here's something that probably is surprising for you. You may start walking these floors one by one. All these 6 floors, you may be walking these floors only to discover that your wife doesn't know how to live on those floors either. So if you're trying for intimacy and she's not able to provide it, then intimacy cannot show up in the marriage except on your side. And that's a one-sided relationship. And it's incredibly important, because otherwise you're going to spend 3 weeks trying all of this and conclude, see, nothing works. No, it's not true. You've just discovered something deeper. You thought you had a sexual intimacy problem, and you don't. You actually have 2 people with different intimacy capacity problems. Okay? Remember that she got an intimacy grid too. Remember what I said at the beginning. Every child develops a grid for intimacy. That's in video 1. Your wife did as well. Maybe when she was little, no one asked her, what are you feeling? Maybe she learned, when I tell people what I'm feeling, I get dismissed. Or when I saw other people express feelings, they got shut down. Children are illogical and emotionally dysregulated. Well, so you cry because you want something and you get spanked for it. I mean, it's like she may have learned dealing with yourself. Maybe emotions overwhelmed the adults around her. Maybe needing comfort produced disappointment. Maybe asking for help didn't get her help. Maybe vulnerability was criticized. Maybe somebody was intrusive and controlling or unpredictable, or she had loving parents that just weren't emotionally expressive at all. Maybe independence was highly valued and she was very independent, so she became the easy child and she got rewarded for not needing anyone, just being the responsible, organized, mature one. And that's how she got value and worth, by showing up in her organized, mature way. She was the one who didn't need anything. And eventually not needing becomes safer than needing. So needing is unsafe. Handling things herself became safer than depending. So depending feels off to her. Privacy is safer than being open. So she values privacy and doesn't want to be open. Anytime you're open, you can get accused or mistreated or be used against you or been made fun of or mistreated, or distance probably became safer than emotional exposure. So emotional exposure feels very unsafe inside of her nervous system. So now imagine what happens when you as a husband suddenly show up and say, tell me what's happening inside you. Well, that sounds intimate to you. That's your intent. But it feels intrusive to her. That's the impact. So you're saying, what are you feeling? Well, she might not genuinely know. So you ask another question, and then another, and then another, and you're thinking, I'm pursuing her heart. I'm the hero. Yeah, but her nervous system may be experiencing, why won't this guy just leave me alone? Leave it alone. So you've accidentally turned emotional intimacy into pressure, not knowing that that's what you were doing. No, see, knowing can feel like intrusion. Floor one is knowing. But an avoidant wife has spent years protecting what happens inside of her. She's protected it. So whereas someone who doesn't have avoidance and is not self-protecting those things inside of her, when you ask her, she's like, oh, he finally wants to know me. But for the avoidant wife, it feels like an interrogation. So you're interrogating her into intimacy. So you can't turn how was your day into what happened. How did that make you feel? What do you think that felt like? Does that remind you of childhood? Do you think you're shutting down? I mean, brother, you have to stop. You're not climbing the intimacy ladder anymore. You're conducting an intake assessment. You ought to be able to say, how was your day? And let her meet you where she is. Let her just speak and then receive her answer. And that may be the level of intimacy. That may be the capacity of intimacy that she has. There's actually intimacy there. But if you push for deeper and she doesn't have that emotional capacity or that capacity for that much more intimacy, now you've moved into pressure. So how was your day? Fine. Okay, babe, I'm glad you're home. And you leave the room. You're meeting her where she is. So maybe 20 minutes later, now she'll start talking. Why would she do that? Because invitation created space. Interrogation actually removes space. You're interrogating, that actually is invasive, and it really interrupts her private world, and she feels encroached upon. So in this area of knowing, ask a question, a basic question, let her answer, kiss her on the forehead, and walk away. All right? And then let her nervous system feel safe inside that invitation. Don't turn it into an interrogation. Okay? Secondly, understanding, floor two. Understanding, it can feel like analysis or evaluation. Okay? If you've learned anything in attachment theory, they tell you do not become your wife's therapist. Okay? Please hear me. Do not sit across from her saying things like, that's your dismissive attachment. You're deactivating right now. You're withdrawing because intimacy is activating your nervous system. You know this is your childhood wound, right? Okay, even if you're technically correct about something, that may be one of the least intimate things you could possibly say. In fact, I would do away with the word avoidant. I could show you 100 different ways that using the word avoidant is hurting your spouse if she is actually has an avoidant attachment style. She is a person. She is not a label. So because now she isn't being known, she's being studied. And there is a massive difference. Understanding says, help me understand you. But analysis says, I've already figured you out and I need to inform you about what's going on with you. So I want to understand you as curiosity. But this analysis, or I've got you figured out, feels very controlling. So instead of you're shutting down because you're avoidant, how about I noticed you got quiet. Do you need some space, or would you rather stay close? Now she has agency. That's much safer for her. You have to learn to be a safe person. So understanding her comes by curiosity, not by analyzing or evaluating her. All right. So that's how you navigate this floor of understanding. The third floor of validation. A lot of times validation can feel for her very suspicious. So suppose you have spent 15 years fixing everything. Okay. She complains, you explain, she gets frustrated, you defend, she says something hurt her, and you tell her why she misunderstood you. And then you watch this, live, okay, that I'm doing right now. And now tomorrow morning you wake up and you say, wow, sweetheart, given everything you've experienced, your emotional response is completely understandable. She's going to look at you like, who are you and what do you want? Okay, and that's okay. You changed overnight, but her expectations did not change overnight. Trust doesn't develop because you perform validation 3 times. Trust develops because a different experience becomes predictable. Stop looking at your intent and look at the impact. So don't announce I'm working on validation now. Just validate and keep validating. And don't let it be artificial and not manipulative, but genuinely. And over time, she's going to begin to discover, I don't have to fight so hard to have my experience acknowledged anymore. That's how the grid starts changing for her. So you can tell her, I understand why you see it that way. It makes sense why you think that. That's a very important one. I could see why you would think that. Makes sense to me. That's validation. That doesn't mean you agree with everything that she's concluded, but it makes sense. Okay, given what you're dealing with, that makes sense. And let it go. Don't dig in. Don't look for reciprocity. Don't look for how she responds to validation. Just be safe and consistent. Okay, you are helping to retrain her nervous system by providing a person in her life that is safe, because she doesn't have an internal safety, so she uses these adaptations to be safe. All right. Empathy. Let's look at empathy. Empathy actually can feel very dangerous. So this one surprises people a lot of time when I talk about this. You would think everyone wants to be deeply understood, but that's not always true, because being understood requires being seen, and being seen creates vulnerability. And that puts you in the limelight and allows people to judge you and evaluate you and criticize you, and you're putting the good, the bad, and the ugly out there. So it sounds like, for them, it sounds like they're being completely exposed. So when it comes to empathy, you can start off by saying that sounds like it made you feel really alone. Okay. And she says, no, I'm fine. Don't argue. You empathized, and she said, no, I'm fine. She may have not looked like she saw that or received that empathy, but you gave it. You showed up empathetically. Don't argue. Don't say, no, you're not. I can tell you're not fine. You just took empathy and turned it into invasion. Let empathy be empathy. Okay? Let it be empathy. That's it. Not an invasion. So just when you say, when you say to her, for example, that sounds like it made you really feel really alone. And she says, no, I'm fine. Say, okay, well, I just want you to know I'm here. Leave the door open and go about your business. You cannot force someone to receive empathy, but you can give empathy. And the presence of empathy can actually create a safe atmosphere, even though she is not exactly responsive to it. So you can become a person capable of offering it. All right. Now, cherishing. When we look at the arena of cherishing, it can be very difficult for an avoidant woman to receive that. So you might look at her and say, you're beautiful. And she's like, whatever. Or let's say she rolls her eyes, or, you bring flowers. And she says, what do you spend money on these for? Okay. Or you offer to help. She says, no, I got it. Or you say, I appreciate everything you do. And she just changes the subject. And you think, why even bother, right? Because receiving love is a capacity too. You have to understand this. Some people are much better at giving than they are at receiving. Receiving creates vulnerability. Receiving acknowledges that something from you affects me. For someone whose safety was built around self sufficiency, that can be incredibly uncomfortable, right? So cherish without demanding a performance in response. I love that about you. She says, okay, fine. You meant it, didn't you? You don't need, oh my goodness, thank you. That makes me feel so loved. No, your cherishing doesn't become invalid because she doesn't know how to receive it yet. But it does need to be present. You are loving her like Christ loved the church. How many times does his bride, the church, does he do things and she doesn't respond? He gives and she doesn't respond. He cherishes and she doesn't respond. Okay? You don't need the response to validate the cherishing that you give. Learn to cherish, but not demand a performance response from her. Okay? Look at physical affection. Physical affection probably already feels very expensive. And this is a big one. Because suppose for years that almost every prolonged hug, every cuddle, every back rub, every kiss eventually became this attempt to initiate sex. And your wife learned touch has a cost or touch has a destination. Well, now all of a sudden you decide, you know what, I'm going to give affection without expectation. That's great. Okay? Night one, you rub her back. Okay? Then you say, good night, babe. She's suspicious. Okay? Night two, you cuddle and nothing happens. Night three, you kiss her on the forehead and nothing happens. And somewhere inside, you're thinking, she's still not responding. But you need to wait a minute. Because if you're already keeping score, you're still trying to use floor 6 to purchase floor 7. You just changed currencies. You're paying with cuddles now. That's not the turnaround we're talking about. The turnaround we're talking about is I want to become a man capable of affectionate touch, whether or not it produces sex. It's just intimacy, closeness, nearness. And slowly, she may begin learning a hug can just be a hug. A kiss can be a kiss. I'm not going to get a back rub and then get evaluated. It can end with a good night. My body can relax inside his body without having to make a decision about what comes next. And that can absolutely take time. So here's where your work actually begins. Because eventually you're going to do something healthy and she may not respond. You ask, want to talk? She says no. You want to cuddle? No. Can I give you a hug? Not right now. And suddenly, this little boy inside you starts screaming, see, she doesn't want you. You're not enough. She doesn't love you. And this is the moment when your intimacy capacity gets tested. Not when she responds beautifully, but when she doesn't. You have to learn to be the mountain and she is the wind. Can you hear a no without turning it into rejection? Can a no from her be information and data about where she's at rather than your information and data on whether you're not wanted, valued, or worthy? Can you experience disappointment without punishing her? Can you offer connection without forcing connection? Can you allow another human being to have a boundary without interpreting the boundary as personal abandonment to you? That is called emotional maturity. Okay? So how do you address this avoidance? Let me give you some practical principles. Okay? Number one, you have to learn to stop pursuing and start inviting. Try, I'd love to hear about your day if you feel like talking. Instead of, why won't you talk to me? Why are you so quiet? What's up with you? Okay? That doesn't work. Invitation, not pursuit. How about I'd love to spend some time together tonight? And then just let it land. If she doesn't want to, that's okay. If she does, that's okay. So instead of we never spend time together anymore, well, how about I'd like to spend some time together tonight? Okay. Look at her and say, would a hug feel good? And if she says no, okay. You don't sigh, no eye roll, no sulking, no cold shoulder. All right. Just because here's what you're teaching her. Your no is safe with me. Okay? Your no is safe with me. And paradoxically, what happens is people become much more capable of saying yes when they know that they're genuinely allowed to say no. Number two, I want you to offer space without withdrawing love. Offer space, but stay warm. Avoidant people often need space to regulate. But there's an enormous difference between space and punishment. You can say, okay, take whatever time you need. I'm here. That's different from stomping into another room thinking, fine, if she doesn't want me, she can be alone. All right? One says, I respect your autonomy. The other one is saying, you're going to pay for not choosing me. Stop making her pay for needing space. Give space without removing relationship. Number three, stop over questioning. Anytime the overs are present, over question, over explain, over function, there's anxiety there. Okay? Stop over questioning. Learn to ask one good question and tolerate silence. Okay? So you're asking, how are you doing with everything? And then wait. Don't immediately rescue the silence. Don't ask 6 more questions. Don't start explaining what you think she's feeling, or tell her what you think's going on, or give her give her a nervous system analysis. Okay? No. Give her some room to locate an answer. Sometimes she might need 30 seconds. Sometimes she might need 30 minutes. Sometimes she'll come back tomorrow. That's okay. The more safe you are for her to actually be who she is, you are creating access. You're not demanding disclosure. And the safer you become for her, the more closer she actually begins to come toward you. Safety is what produces the intimacy. So doing these 4s in a safe way is what's producing the intimacy. So you're actually going an extra step to be a safe person. You have to become the safest person in her life. You need to make affection less expensive. So you maybe introduce forms of physical closeness that don't automatically escalate. Okay? Rub her feet every night. Check her head with a pick. Scratch her back. Give her a hug in the kitchen. Hold hands. Sit beside one another. Touch her shoulder as you walk by and just walk away. A rub that actually ends as a back rub. Because here's the key. You don't need to mentally invoice her afterward. Don't think, well, I've been affectionate all week and we still haven't had sex. That's a covert contract. You're still purchasing. Okay? You need to understand this. I'm expanding my ability to give and receive affection. The 5th thing I want to say is, don't make her your source of identity. Again, I've said this, I'm going to say it again. It's enormous. If every no from your wife becomes, I'm undesirable, I'm not masculine, I'm unloved, I'm unwanted, I'm failing as a husband, then every single sexual interaction is going to carry enormous pressure. And a woman who is under pressure can only perform duty and obligation. Pressure and intimacy cannot happen at the same time. This is where intimacy with God and intimacy with yourself become foundational. Because if you know who you are, you know that you're loved, you know that you're valuable, you know that you're chosen, you can experience desire without being ruled by desire. In other words, this is my wife. I don't need her, but I want her. I can experience disappointment without that becoming rejection. I can experience loneliness without it meaning I'm being abandoned. My wife's emotional state does not determine my identity. That's security. And you get security in this arena over here. Okay, your relational grid should be God, who is your father first, self second, and then others. Okay, the other thing I want to say is don't disappear either. I need you to balance everything I just said, because some men will hear what I'm teaching and conclude, so I just leave her alone forever. That's not what I said. I said you're inviting, you're initiating, you're speaking. That's, listen, just leaving her alone forever, that's not security either. Your needs matter, your wants matter, your desire matters, your desire for emotional connection matters, your desire for affection matters, your sexuality matters, your longing for partnership matters. So you're allowed to say, I love you, and I also want a marriage where we're emotionally connected. Okay, you're allowed to say it. You can say, I don't want to pressure you sexually, but our sexual relationship matters deeply to me and I want us to be able to talk about it. You can say, I respect your need for space. I also need us to come back together and finish this conversation. Those are all important because secure love respects autonomy, but also doesn't abandon mutuality. You cannot just respect one person's autonomy and revolve around her. You can respect the autonomy, but also not abandon the mutuality. All right? Now, in all of this, if your wife has an avoidant attachment, she has work to do as well. And I want to make it incredibly clear. If your wife is dismissive avoidant, the solution is not you have to become perfectly safe while she changes nothing. Okay? No, attachment explains behavior, but it does not give us permission to remain relationally unavailable forever. She has work too. Okay? She has to expand her capacity to be known. She has to expand her capacity to communicate. She has to be able to tolerate vulnerability a little bit more. She has to take nervous system safe steps to express her needs in little ways, receive a little bit better, receive affection, participate in repair, remain emotionally present. That's called expanding your capacity. You may want her to be here and she's down here, but it has to be her will that says, I'm going to grow in this area. You're creating a safe atmosphere where that transformation can happen. She can then take responsibility for things that she can change when the pressure on the relationship is being relieved and you're being safe and she's not experiencing the pressure. Now you're discovering that closeness doesn't automatically mean losing, or she's discovering that closeness doesn't automatically mean losing herself. Now you cannot do that work for her. And it's one of the hardest lessons for a husband is that you can be safe, you can stop unnecessary pressure, you can regulate yourself, you can communicate, you can handle conflict in a regulated way, you can honor boundaries and cherish and listen, you can change your patterns, but you cannot make another adult become intimate. Intimacy is her responsibility as well. The goal here is mutuality and reciprocity. That's what a relationship is built on. So we're not trying to create a marriage where one person endlessly accommodates the other's wounds. We're trying to create two people who are increasingly capable of intimacy. Okay? So maybe your wound says, if you don't want me, I'm not okay. Well, maybe hers says, if I need you, then I'm not safe. Well, look at that. So then you would have to learn, I can be okay even when connection isn't immediately available. And she has to learn, I can remain myself while experiencing connection. So you learn not to pursue until she disappears. She learns not to disappear whenever you invite. And you develop capacity for autonomy. She develops capacity for connection, and you both move towards security together. Okay? Now, here's the question I want you to take home right now. Can you become intimate without being immediately rewarded for intimacy? You can be intimate without immediately being rewarded for intimacy. Now, the reason that's important is because if your wife has an avoidant attachment, you are not, reciprocity comes slow. It comes at the speed of safety, and not the safety you offer, but the safety she feels. Can you listen even if tonight doesn't end in sex? Can you cherish even if she doesn't respond perfectly? Can you offer affection without escalation? Can you offer space without retaliating, or allow space without retaliating against that? Can you communicate your wants without making them demands? Can you tolerate disappointment without collapsing into rejection? Can you love her while allowing her choices to remain hers? Okay? And can you also love yourself enough to say, I desire a mutually intimate marriage, and I'm not going to pretend that chronic disconnection doesn't matter. Okay? If she is not meeting you in all these areas, that is not just disconnection. All of this is normal in a relationship, but all of this can be triggering to her in a relationship. And so the mutual intimacy is not there. And if you're showing up on one side, we can't pretend that that chronic disconnection doesn't matter. And that's the balance. Not pursuit, but not withdrawal. Not self-erasure, but not control. Both securely present and safe for each other inside the relationship. And that's why I call it the intimacy turnaround. Because maybe you started this conversation believing, well, we have a sex problem. But now you've discovered, I actually don't know how to experience intimacy without sexuality. And she may not know how to experience sustained emotional intimacy on these other 6 floors without feeling pressure. Now we're talking about the real problem. Not how do I get my avoidant wife to have more sex with me. No, it's how do we become 2 people increasingly capable of intimacy. Knowing, understanding, validation, empathy, cherishing, physical vulnerability, and sexual intimacy. Without either of you losing yourself, without intimacy becoming currency, without sex becoming proof of worth, without space becoming abandonment, without closeness becoming control, without a no becoming rejection, without avoidance becoming an excuse for permanent disconnection. So brothers, that's the work. Don't just increase the frequency of intimacy, increase your capacity for it, and invite your wife to increase hers with you. Because the goal isn't simply getting back to the 7th floor. That's never the goal. The goal is to build an entire marriage where both of you can finally live in the whole house. And that takes you work and her work. I pray that this video helped you to see the right approach given these dynamics. All right. Well, if you have any questions, let me know. Hit me up in the DMs. Make some comments. Please subscribe and share. I pray this was a blessing to you. Have a great day.